My name is Gus. I live in a bus. I travel to take pictures of beautiful people, beautiful places, and I share my experiences with you. So let's go. It's March 2019. About 2 years ago, like within a few days, my actual insurance on my bus is due on the 17th. So on the 17th, I had my bus insured. Sometime prior to that, I had bought the bus, probably a week to 10 days beforehand. And until then, I had a temporary insurance because I wanted to change the bus registration from commercial school bus, because that's what it was the day I bought it. It was still owned by the school bus company, and I had to get it converted to a consumer type vehicle. So since it's around my 2-year anniversary living in my bus, the actual anniversary of the date that I first slept in it would be the last day of March. Then I gave my notice in my apartment, and so I paid rent for April, but never slept in my apartment. And May 1st, I was out and legitimately did not have an apartment to live in. So this video is not so much about the bus itself. However, I'm going to talk about, what I did prior to moving in, or prior to starting to sleep in it at least, during that month between having an apartment and sort of sleeping in the bus versus having no apartment and living in the bus. So I had bought my bus and I had put a bed in it and I had cabinets in it. So I took it out and parked it overnight and slept in it. And I had to do that before I was going to make my decision to give my notice. I slept in it one night. And that sleep was way better than the sleep I was having in my apartment. Primarily because it was a little chillier. In other words, there was some fresh air, and it was a more reasonable temperature. My apartment was quite hot. I couldn't really control the heat very well. It had baseboard heaters, and you couldn't actually turn them off. So in the wintertime, the place would be way too hot. In the summertime, it was generally reasonable, but if it was very, very hot outside, it also got to be very hot. So my apartment seemed to be very stuffy and warm. But the first night I was in my truck, or my bus, I was so comfortable it was crazy. So I was so pleased with that night, I just decided to move into the bus. Okay, so this story is about owning a bus, living in a bus, and traveling in a bus. There's a lot of people who talk about the need for stealth, and I suppose, if you're self-conscious in any way, you need to have a stealth vehicle. But when I bought the bus, I was kind of concerned about that. I thought maybe I'm buying a problem. In other words, I'm buying a parking problem. I'm buying something that's going to make life difficult. Simply because it stands out and it's a little bit weird to a lot of people. Whereas to a lot of other people, it's very cool. I would have thought that most people would think it's kind of weird, and maybe must be a meth lab in there or something like that. So I moved into the bus, and I was in it about, I was probably out of town, up in a town called Kelowna, and over on Vancouver Island. By July and August, I had done both of those for a month. I had some minor, well, I shouldn't say minor, the actual problem was minor mechanical problems, but at first they were very expensive. I haven't driven for lots of years, and I don't have sort of mechanical abilities that relate to the newer vehicles so much, and absolutely no experience with diesel before. So I had an expensive exchange of a what do you call it, one of the control boxes. The box was actually controls the pressure to the fuel injectors. So that was an expensive proposition, and after buying the bus, in order to have it pass the inspection, I needed to buy 4 tires for the back because it's a dually, and they were a total of about $1,200. So I had spent quite a bit of money on that one big problem and the tires, but otherwise, you know, I was so far figured I had a good deal. It was reliable going up to the Okanagan, and it was reliable on my island trip, and it's basically been reliable for the last 2 years. Anyway, essentially I have a vehicle that is mechanically sound, so I don't really have any worries or any issues about that. The only issue that remained out of all of the possible concerns that I had was, where do I park? You know, how do I park my bus? How do I sort of hide it or blend it in or whatever it might be? That was at least my impression when I started out. But since then, I've been driving around up and down, up the coast, or down the coast to California. I've been right down to San Diego. Went over to Arizona, parked in the desert there. Came back. I lived in Las Vegas in my bus for about a month. And I've been up and down the coast to California, to Southern California twice now. So the original concern that I had was where would I park my bus, or how would my life be like in that bus? My life has actually been way better, and parking has been just about zero problem. I've driven a few miles at times in order to find the right spot, but after after you've done this for a little while, you realize it's really easy to find a place to park that suits your needs or suits my bus. And parking is the biggest question that everybody has about van life. It's really hardly an inconvenience once you understand where it's reasonable for you to park. I park wherever it doesn't say no parking, or it doesn't say overheight. Have overheight issues. So in my community in Vancouver, I can park on any main street anywhere in front of any coffee shop, a place with Wi-Fi. That's why I pick coffee shops and stuff. I can park in front of any of them all night long after 9 o'clock if the sign says 1 hour parking, 9 to 9 or something, 9 to 7, whatever. So as long as I arrive after the parking meter restrictions are over, I can simply park there and no one gives me a bad time. Now, a lot of people might think, well, Vancouver's a special place. They're not hassling people in vans. But I was traveling through Laguna Beach, which is a community, it's an expensive community. It's very small. It has 3 main streets that are about 2 or 3 blocks long. And each of those main streets are surrounded by expensive restaurants, galleries, expensive art galleries, and other expensive clothing stores. Well, I just parked right there on the main street in front of the tea shop and used the tea shop's Wi-Fi all night in my silver bus. I was the only vehicle on that street that night, and nobody bothered me. In the morning, the people said, "Hi there, how you doing? That's a nice bus. I like your solar panels on the side." Nobody bothered me. That's the whole point. Didn't matter where I went. I didn't have any bother except in a state park where there is a person paid to come and patrol the highway in the state park, and then he just said he'd like me to leave. He wasn't rude, and he was just a very nice, polite guy. He says, "I'm not allowed to do that. Please go." Well, I was going as soon as my coffee was finished, but that's one time when somebody gave me a bad time. Otherwise, I basically park where I want, but I don't want to park in front of a, what do you call it, I don't want to park in a crappy place. I'm going to park in a nice place. But then I might be unusual because I don't mind traffic noise beside me. I can park right on the side of the highway when every truck that goes by rocks my bus. But I don't care because I'm sleeping, and that won't wake me up. What does wake me up is a loud bang on the vehicle, or, you know, something that's incredibly unusual. Well, after I bought the bus, I was able to go away and travel wherever I want, whenever I want. And sleeping in it is a dream. It really is. It was really much nicer. So what's the benefit for me is that I get to travel. And the reason I bought the bus was so that I could travel. I didn't have any other reason. I mean, it's not nicer living in a bus than it is living in an apartment, necessarily. But if you're traveling around and you can go and visit different places, it's definitely a solution to being stuck in an apartment. So what problems have I had in 2 years? None. Nothing that I think is beyond what one would expect. We're going to have breakdowns of the vehicle. In other words, there's going to be times when I have to fix something. But I haven't had any major problems. I mean, a few videos ago, you might have seen that I had a fuel bowl heater short out. And if you look at the videos, I'm parked in front of McDonald's in a 1-hour parking spot for 3 or 4 days before I towed it away from there. Parking's not a problem. People around us, and I was in an affluent neighborhood. The people that go by don't look at me and go, "Oh man, that's a bad guy to have in the neighborhood." And many of them would come by and say, "Are you going to be here very long?" So what have I gotten? How did it benefit me? Well, I've traveled 1,000, maybe 1,500 miles or 2,000-ish kilometers throughout my province here in BC, visiting towns and cities that I love, and enjoying the weather in those communities in the summer. I've traveled to Vancouver Island twice, which is probably another 1,200 kilometers, maybe 1,000 miles. And I've enjoyed different towns and, much of the sort of coastline, or at least the eastern coastline of Vancouver Island. I have traveled down the west coast, including the northern and southern Oregon and California coastline. Traveled into Arizona, where I visited with a whole bunch of other van dwellers. And I have essentially traveled up and down that west coast road twice. I've spent 2 summers in southern California or southern Arizona, or 2 winters, I mean. They felt like summer when I got down there. I spent 2 winters down south where it's nice and warm. And that was all I intended to do. I'm not married to van life. I don't have to live in a van, except for the fact that I do want to travel. So I'll live in this van or in a bus, until such time as I no longer want until this travel that I have planned is getting boring. In fact, when I bought the bus, it wasn't like a life-changing decision. I bought the bus with the intention of traveling around in it. And when I put the bed in and slept in it, if I didn't like sleeping in it, I could have sold the bus. In other words, there was 0 risk in buying a vehicle in order to start to travel. There is 0 risk for others if they decide to buy a bus or a van or a car, whatever it is they plan to do. If they make they save up enough to buy a vehicle, they can move out, no longer pay rent, and they can certainly afford the vehicle. Almost anybody in North America can afford to own a vehicle if they don't pay rent. If you have a driver's license and you have owned a vehicle in the past, then you know what there is to maintaining a vehicle. You pay insurance, you buy gas, and then you have to do some maintenance somehow or another, or fix repairs, one or the other. But those extra costs are going to come no matter what. So if you've owned a vehicle in the past, There's nothing that I can tell you about the cost of owning a vehicle, because you know the cost, and that doesn't vary. It doesn't really vary between a new one and an old one. If you bought a brand new vehicle, you're going to lose as much money in depreciation as you might if you bought an old one and had to fix it up. A vehicle costs so much, period. You can make a bad purchase and have it be very expensive, and you can make a good purchase and have it be a little less expensive. But there's always maintenance and there's always risk when you buy a used vehicle. So once you've accepted that risk and you've bought your vehicle, you can decide after that. You can decide after you've hung out in it for a week or a month or even 6 months. Then you could give your notice and live in a van or a bus like I'm doing. So you can manage your risk. There's no reason for you to ever think that this sort of lifestyle is not for you unless you've actually tried it. There's no reason for you to think that this is the ultimate lifestyle for you if you haven't tried it. There will be a lot of people that will be just too nervous to park where I do. They'll just think, oh my God, somebody's going to, I'm noticeable, they can see me, somebody's going to come and get me. Well, you know, I have a different attitude. I used to get parking tickets when I drove around in the city in a suit, visiting presidents of huge companies in order to make sales and stuff and having a lunch. I used to get tickets then. Now, I don't like tickets, but the worst that happens to me is I get a ticket. The worst thing in 2 years is a ticket. And, you know, some of the times they're in cities I'll never visit again, which means that I never pay that ticket. You know, I don't get it. I don't get why people are concerned, other than if they want to live in one city all the time, then they probably, in other words, I have a friend that lives in Vancouver. He has a stealth van. He thinks stealth is really important, and probably for him it is. But my bus is totally unstealthy. In some respects, you know, it's a beacon. It's almost a bright light to people. However, my friend who has a 40-foot bus that's painted pink, she has no problem with being stealth. She parks that where she knows it's reasonable and therefore has no trouble. So parking is not a problem. It's just, you know, you approach it the way you approach it, in a manner that makes you comfortable, and then life goes on. Life is very easy. But don't be afraid, you know, if you're driving down the highway and you stop at the side of the road by the water with a beautiful view, right there on the highway in a beautiful city in California. Don't be afraid. You might get a ticket. You might wake up with a piece of paper on your windshield in the morning, and then you'll drive away to another beautiful spot. And who could care? You might get a ticket every damn day for your whole trip through California, for example. Well, what happened? You would just have a ticket from a whole bunch of communities that you know, nothing happens. They don't tow your vehicle when you're in it. They don't tow it ever, unless you've gotten like 3, 4, 5 tickets in that community. You don't have to worry about being towed. So I kind of got off topic. It was really about me and really about my bus, and not so much about decisions that you would make. The main big difference for me in my life now is that I meet a whole lot of new and interesting people. They are sometimes other van dwellers or somebody in a bus or, you know, different kind of vehicle. But mostly they are just people. People who come up to my bus and say, hi there, can you tell me about your solar panels? Or hi there, can you tell me about what life is like in your bus? Hi there, do you live in your bus? You know, there'll be a whole lot of people that come along and they're very inquisitive about my lifestyle. I've met artists whose pictures are hanging in one of the Queen's castles, or he says, he first said it was hanging in Buckingham Palace, and then he went, well, I don't really know which of the castles she has it hanging in. I met businessmen who have come by and talked to me every day, or like for weeks, about their business plans, because they have, they're just finding another sounding board to talk to about that business. I've met lots of people who live a similar lifestyle and a whole lot more people who wish they could live this lifestyle. But most will never make a step towards it. They'll dream about it, think about it, you know, admire it, but they'll also have things that keep them stuck in their home or stuck in their lifestyle. So I don't really try to tell people that they should be doing this, because there are a lot of other ways to accomplish my goal to travel. You could just get on a plane and travel somewhere. The only difference is you wouldn't be able to spend as much time there. And you might not enjoy the travel part. In other words, they would be fixated on the destination. And I'm actually fixated on the travel to it. So I'm sitting beside the Gus in a Bus sign on purpose. I want you to subscribe if you can. Follow me as I travel around. I don't travel all the time. I've got a budget. I have to live within the budget. And if the budget gets kind of skewered by repairs or something like that, or additional expenses, then I have to stay in the same place more than I normally would. If I had the budget, I might drive every day just another 50 miles to the next town or the next nice pretty location and show you that. But at the moment I'm kind of stuck in my city in Vancouver, and the reason I stay here when I'm broke or nearly broke or to save money is because I know where everything is. I know how to save money here. So enjoy your day, enjoy your afternoon or your evening, and come back and visit with me tomorrow.